Hello and welcome to Green IT on a Cloud, Cycloid's podcast, the show where we turn sustainability from a buzzword into a to-do list. I'm Ben Hewison, your host. If you've ever stared at a cloud bill that reads like a plot twist in a thriller novel, you're in the right place. Here's a promise for you. We're going to offer fewer acronyms than KYAML, and when they do sneak in, we will translate. So for example, PUE is power use effectiveness, WUE is water use effectiveness, but you're going to have to wait to hear that question. Today, I'm joined by two brilliant guests. We have Benoit Petit from Hubblo, an open source powerhouse behind the Scaphandre energy measurement agent and a long-time voice for evidence-based green IT. He helps teams measure what matters and ditch what doesn't. And I'd also like to introduce Julien Syx, the CTO and Product Lead at Cycloid. He builds platform engineering guardrails, so the green and golden path is the easy path for developers to follow. Think self-service, better defaults, and less waste sneaking into production. So what's on the menu for greenifying our day? Well, we're going to look a little bit into data centers and growth. We're going to look at reading the fine print when it talks to things like PUE and WUE, cooling and disclosure. We'll take a reality check on AI. Can we cut compute, cost, and water without killing innovation? And of course, we'll look at GreenOps versus FinOps, right? Or with FinOps, right? So how can we align budgets with impact? Because they're not the same thing. And then, of course, we'll also look at a 90-day plan. What 3 things could you do this quarter, or what thing could you do these next weeks to help you improve your sustainability? And yes, we will keep the jargon in staging. So if anyone says synergy, they owe the show and the world a tree. Ready? Let's dive in. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, Benoit, just introduce yourself and let our audience know a little bit about yourself. Over to you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Benoit Petit. I work for Hubblo, who's a study company running studies for governmental agencies, client from the private sector as well. And every time it's about ICT and environmental questions. It could be on different aspects. We do, as you said, a bit of software too, but we are not a software editor. It's more like we build software when it makes sense to highlight impact outputs, let's say impact biggest shares on a given system, or to highlight big macro tendencies to make people understand better what ICT environmental impact means. And we help organizations to transform themselves as well. It's not just technical advices. It's more like general purpose advices depending on the on what the person in front of us is doing in the company. And we are also, I just to finish, I also work as a volunteer in a nonprofit called Boa Vista, which is producing digital commons to help with this topic, so better understanding, better measurement of different kind of ICT environmental impacts. So yeah, that's all for me.
Brilliant, Benoit. Well, fantastic. Thank you. Interesting life and a busy life and lots of activity in this green and sustainability space. That's fantastic to hear. Thank you. Okay, so now, Julien, if you could just introduce yourself, let us know a little bit about your background and yeah, again, anything that you'd like to tell the world.
Sure. So hello everyone, I'm Julian. So I have an ops background, but when I'm not doing ops, I'm doing some development. And when I'm doing too much development, then I get back on ops because, yeah, always balancing between both. So yeah, I joined Cycloid more than 10 years ago. Founded it with Benjamin Brial. So at Cycloid, we're building a platform engineering that is unified also with an internal developer platform. So you have the best of both worlds mixing together in one product. So you may wonder how it is related to sustainability and why I'm currently in this call. And that's a good question. We integrated a FineOps and GreenOps module in our product because we think that helping centralizing all things you deploy on cloud and being able to track it, because we found that there's so much waste on money, on cost, but also on environmental cost on cloud providers, because people are deploying things and they totally forget, but they deployed something. So we think that centralizing everything into one platform and having a way to track all the assets from all the different cloud providers that you connect into one platform will help to produce some reporting and being able to track, as I said, the financial cost, but also the environmental cost. Is trying to estimate. I think we'll talk during this podcast about how estimating things, because that's a really complicated topic. But at least we try to give an estimation. And so yeah, that's why I'm currently in this call, and also on the personal level, I'm a climate risk facilitator, trying to spread some awareness about sustainability and so on. So that's it.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, as we move forward, we will try to balance the load of questions that we ask and make sure that we focus on finance and the sustainability element, because they do go hand in hand, right? And as we know, it's important to improve our bottom line as we improve the Earth's bottom line. So, without further ado, let's dive into some questions. We're going to use a Q&A format, right? So I will first ask Benoit a question, and then open the table for Julien to have, to intercede with his thoughts as well. But of course, it's an open forum, it's just a chat, and let's go for it. So, as Benoit is our special guest, I will of course give him the honor of answering our first question. So, Benoit, what is the biggest myth about green IT? And what data or what kind of process or what reporting disproves that, right?
I'd say the biggest one would be that it's enough to optimize in green IT, in ICT in general. That's the first focus most people have. And while it can be useful, and sometimes it's very useful, I'm not saying the opposite, it's really like the third kind of impactful action you might have. So the idea, very summarized, is that we could split, let's say, environmental action in ICT in three categories. It's a framework from me, so it's not like the guidebook for it. It's just a way to think about it. So you would have first robustness actions or business model redirection actions. So thinking about really what you are producing and if it's compatible with planetary limits, and if not, how you could adapt that, which means way more than just technical questions. It means organizational questions, business questions, and so on. So it's everything in a row. Second one would be what in France we call sobriety, but this term doesn't fit much with outside of France. It doesn't work that much. I think we should find another word. But anyway, sobriety would mean thinking about your impacts as absolute impacts. So thinking about the impacts of the whole company and the whole activity, not just a subsystem. Even if after you have identified very impactful parts of your activity, you might focus on it and then focus on the system and then optimize. That makes sense. And then you have optimization. And most of the time what happens is that we go through optimization, then realize it's not enough, go through sobriety, then realize it's maybe not enough yet, and go through redirection or business model thinking. But I think if we started on the other way, it would work much better. So yeah, but just to prove that, and then I will let Julien answer as well. To prove that optimization is not enough, that's, as I said, in 90% cases we go through optimization first. The ICT industry says we are optimizing, we are doing better efficiency. Everything is about that, and the results are here. All the big techs have increasing greenhouse gas emissions yearly greenhouse gas emissions by double-digit figures. ICT is still one of the sectors with the fastest pace of greenhouse gas emission growth. I think it's like 6 or 7% per year, something like that. Data centers will consume twice as much as today in 2030, most probably. So everything shows that it just doesn't work. We have to rethink the whole framework, not just optimizing system. That would be my take on this.
Yeah, it sounds like we have an optimization and a process problem, right? And then also, in effect, which leads us to positioning issues, right? Julian, I heard the word that I know that we use a lot in Cycloid, sobriety, right? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, but I can't agree more about the issue with optimization. And I always, because I use it also this argument during my climate risk animation. I always take some the comparison with cars, because cars, I think everyone has a car and everyone can understand this comparison. We always try to improve and optimize cars to reduce the consumption. And finally, you had cars 20, 30, 40 years ago that were consuming, I don't know, like 5 liters per 100 kilometers. And now we still have exactly the same, but we just have bigger cars. And finally, we didn't optimize, we optimized, but we didn't reduce the consumption. We just growth the whole car and so on. And finally, that's a kind of a rebound effect of optimization. We're always increasing. And even if we try optimizing the emission about, I don't know, GPU and so on, it will just be to add more and more GPU and finally staying exactly at the same level. So I totally agree that optimization is the wrong way to start with, and it would be better to first thinking about decreasing and then optimizing at the end.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I think it encapsulates a lot of business thought, right? That sometimes that easier, kind of more KPI influenced path seems something that the better path to take, and then when we end up with ourselves, we see what we've gone wrong. Brilliant. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay, so on to the next question. And Julien, this one is for you. So I'm going to talk about something I think fairly close to your heart in some way. It's data center growth, right? But when does expansion not hurt sustainability? And is that phrase even possible in reality? Or does physics tell us no?
Yeah, I don't think it's really feasible. I think it sounds a bit paradoxical. I'm not sure about expansion, considering the state of the planet. Could go with sustainability. We can probably mitigate by increasing more and more efficiency of data center, using renewable energy and so on. But I don't think we can talk about sustainability because, as I said previously, it's like Carson. We just adding more and more and more, and expansion is trying to expand something infinite into a finite world. So yeah, I don't think data center will be able to grow, because it's not only about energy, because we are really, we can always focus on energy, but on the data center there's also the water consumption, but also you're using the land, because you will need some concrete in order to create the building and so on. You will need a lot of materials like iron and all those things to create data center. So it can't grow for forever and ever, considering all the planet limits. And I'm not only talking about the climate. Uh, I don't think we can talk about sustainability if we talk about expansion.
I think I have to agree. Benoit, what do you think? What do you think on this level? Is there any possibility for expansion with sustainability? Is there any way to optimize, or is it just a pipe dream?
Yeah, it links to the first question. Like, if we are expanding while optimizing, yeah, you might reduce per data center impacts, but the idea is how many data centers and how big they are when you build them. And the trend, it's very, very interesting this is because AI wave is just enhancing all the trends that were already there, but by sometimes 10 times. And so it's like even more obvious than it was before, even if the industry is very hiding some figures. And yeah, that's why Microsoft got plus 30% on greenhouse gas emissions on 1 year. It's mainly because of concrete of the new data centers. And what would work, to be very, very honest about the situation we are in, what would work is densification, keeping the same building and hardware capacity. That would work. If we focus on the same capacity, keep it, then optimize to make as many use cases as possible fit in that capacity. That would be effective. Um, that would be effective action, but it would mean planification. It would mean maybe regulation, maybe quotas, maybe limiting the resources we allow ourselves to use. And that's really the opposite of how it works in ICT today, and how even the countries are acting regarding ICT, because these days are more about deregulation. It's more about, in France, we have those fast track projects, which means we will bypass all the regulation steps to be able to build new data centers. In the US, it's even more. We saw it with the second version of the Colossus data centers, with gas power plants all over the place, with the electricity production put just across the border of the nearby states to be able to bypass the environmental restrictions. So everything is about deregulation today. So basically, yeah, I don't think it would work, but that's the way we are going. So we'll see if it works at some point. Maybe they will prove me wrong.
Yeah, well, I think the environment and humanity can hope that we are all proved wrong on that front. Let's see where we go. Of course, we can't predict the future, but maybe we could predict what happened in the next 90 days. So, Benoit, this next question is for you. I'm going to call it a 90-day plan, but it's just a 90-day thought process, right? If you could only do, 3 things at maximum, or even one thing in the next 90 days, what is it, or what are they? And what, greenwashing action would you refuse to take?
So in the next 90 days, in such a short period, I would focus on the relationship with the manufacturers and vendors are rely on, and operators could be also that is an operator, and set rules that are mandatory so that I, as a company, would buy their services or products. And it would focus, those rules would focus on hardware lifetime, hardware, software compatibility with all the hardware, maintenance of software so that my hardware doesn't go to waste before, let's say, 10 years. That would be good. So it's far from the reality today. In the workplace, the average lifetime of devices is something like 4 years. For servers, it could be 6 years, but that's not much more than that. So that's an action that many people would say is hard to take. I would say it's one of the easiest, because at some point you are a company, you have a lot of money, you can buy a lot of equipments to a manufacturer, and you can force them to set different standards. And the second point in 90 days would be training and explaining to every stakeholder, including people from the board, in what situation we are. And then the right actions might have a better chance to come out if you explain exactly the situation we are in, not just the usual greenwashing stuff. Would be, it links to your second question, greenwashing to avoid would be humanity will adapt. That's okay. It would be our company is doing its best, because we can count on one hand the companies in the world that are actually doing very ambitious impact reductions plans. Not more than one hand, really. And especially in ICT, we are what I would avoid is what we do is what the industry does every time, focusing on the relative impact of one unit, focusing on, okay, I reduced, or here is I won't mention anyone, here is the impact of one inference on my GenAI system. This is a big issue. The topic is not what is the impact of one inference. The topic is what's the impact of the whole system, and what does it mean locally, globally, on different impact criteria. Those questions are never addressed, and if you don't address them, you're just not transparent. So that's greenwashing.
That makes a lot of sense. Uncomfortable truths make people uncomfortable, and if they can avoid talking about those uncomfortable truths, they always will do, right? And we kind of accept that publicly, I think, a lot of the time, from individuals and from companies as well, and also from, of course, from entire industries and countries, right? So that's a very key point, Benoit. I love that one. Julien, what do you have any thoughts on this one as well? No, 90 days. What could we do in a kind of technological sense, or in a coding sense, or in a programming sense to help ourselves in 90 days?
Yeah, totally. But I have a cycloid biases. I will preach a little bit what we're doing at Cycloid. But yeah, on the 90 day, well, I will especially focus on the shadow IT and track all the things that are running and shouldn't, and trying to automate start and stop for non-production environment and so on in the company. It's kind of related with the first question when we're talking about sobriety. And I would start by that. And I think then on the next day, I totally agree with Benoit. I will try to 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 enforce with some customer power, let's say, to enforce some policies about the hardware. And I will try to enforce policies across all the company to ensure that we stay a bit more aware um, about having some policies to avoid shadow IT, to consume with being more sober, and also take care about the hardware we are buying, and how could we use it until the end. I mean, if it's still working, if it's still adapted to our work, then let's try to use it and not just replacing things because there's something that is fancier and better. So, and yeah, so that's what I will do. I will try really to avoid this. The greenwashing I would refuse is right to buy also a cheap carbon offset to claim carbon neutrality while ignoring that all the cloud waste already have. I think a priority must be to reduce the consumption first.
That's brilliant. Yeah, embracing putting light on the shadow IT by avoiding buying shiny things is a very nice, neat message. I think that's a great one, and I think it really does matter as well. I've read a Reddit post recently about instances that were spun up and forgotten about for 6-7 months, and they were losing thousands of euros every month, but also all that carbon, all of that electricity, all of that water, everything just wasted for nothing. So I think it's really important that we maintain and understand and look into those dark spaces that we don't want to talk about and that we're not willing to share publicly. Next question for you, Julien. It's an interesting one. I think it follows on from that a little bit, right? It's this idea of from code, what we code, into what energy and what electricity it uses. So, I mean, are there software choices and coding choices that we can make that have real impact, such as the language which we code in, the amount we cache, data size, or this idea of batch versus real time, are there software and programming choices we can make that will improve our consumption or reduce it rather than improve it, I guess?
Yeah, today, but I think there are few things you can change on the software choices. The first one is the programming language. There are few studies, scientific studies that exist about the difference between compiled languages and scripting languages. We can observe, like for example, that on C, Rust, C++, you have a 50 time factor compared to scripting languages like Python or Perl And so yeah, compiled language are usually more energy efficient. So for the same computational task. So I think you should consider the product you're doing, or at least the program you're doing, if it could be better with compiled language. I think that also the pillar of the data transfer also. Which technology do we want to use? There are also some studies that prove that using a cellular network, it's 10 times more energy consuming than a Wi-Fi connection. So yeah, we talk a lot about the 5G revolution, about IoT, etc. I think we could have some focus also on the data transfer, and also the famous batch versus real time. There are also some kind of improvement where you can shift the workload to time when the grid is greener. So doing some what we call carbon aware computing. I think you can sometimes focus on those kind of improvement. If you have some ingestion, for example, of batch and so on, you can do it at night, or but you can also doing on the day. But thanks to the cloud, you can find some cloud some data center that are at the opposite of the world, and they're during the night. They're doing they're using solar energy or well anything. You can reduce some consumption, I think.
Brilliant, great, thank you, Julien. Benoit, what do you think? What software choices or coding choices or language choices can we make that would impact positively this use of electricity and water, etc.?
Yeah, on the technical aspect of it, it's potentially a complex topic because, yeah, for sure, if you compare in a very simple kind of task, compiled language to interpreted language, you might have better results. Yeah, that actually I agree. There are studies about that, but there is a project, actually an open source project that's ongoing in Boa Vista on trying to get some insights on that. But what they tried to integrate was not just the choice of the language, it was also the choice of the kind of database technology, whether there were caches or not, whether the code was pretty optimized or written, let's say, in a rush, not very optimized. They try to integrate several variables like that, which doesn't give a complete understanding of the topic because, of course, it's a complex topic, but it gives some insights on would we get better results in terms of hardware weight or environmental impact on this stack or another. And it's very interesting because it shows that when you add up variables to the equation, it's not as binary as we can imagine. Let's say you could have a stack with Rust that would be worse than a stack in PHP, depending on what are the other variables and how.
Yeah, it really depends, but generally speaking, I think if you had to develop the Linux kernel in JavaScript, I'm
Yeah, of
pretty
course.
sure you'll have some
Yeah,
some weird results.
Of course, the question is what is the use case you serve, and
Yeah,
it was
totally.
to be fair, this let's say this open benchmark is more about web apps, so it's one kind of use case. If we go on another use case, we would probably have different results, and for sure, if you talk about code that doesn't have so much dependencies and it's more about managing the system, which is a very good example, then compiled language is like a go-to. You don't have to think about it twice, and
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. But
Brilliant.
just to add up in like one, not more than 30 seconds, on the carbon aware computing is very interesting because we are running these days, Hubblo, we are running for ADEM a study on carbon aware computing, and we are trying to modelize the effects of carbon aware computing in a consequential approach. Consequential meaning we are not just accounting for environmental impacts that would be spared or that would be generated. It's we try to modelize both the positive and negative effects of having a carbon-aware approach. And it's very interesting because it shows it's not released yet, but it shows that it's a very complex topic. And the thing in ICT is that when we talk about carbon-aware computing, most of the time we talk about carbon-aware computing from a software perspective. And the thing is, there are multiple layers between the software and what actually happens on the electricity grid. And when we look at those constraints, it's not so obvious that carbon-aware computing can save a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. It can in some situations. It seems like I will really brush a very raw portrait of the study, but it seems more interesting on the time shifting perspective, like shifting at moments when it's better than geographical shifting. Geographical shifting seems very, very dependent on many variables, which makes it not obvious as an impact saver. So yeah, I won't spoil the study that's not even finished, but it's a very, very complex topic. It would be a rabbit hole to discuss about that in detail.
Brilliant. That's really interesting, and especially that geographical versus time differential, right? I think again, it's often the less obvious points that make the most sense in the end, and it proves that the benefit of research is super important in making any decisions and talking to experts such as Benoit.
Sometimes we're talking about both time and geographical because it allows you to run something like it was real time, but in another geography that benefits from having night or being less consuming at this moment. So that's why, yeah, we often make the assumption that both are related, geographical and time shift. And but yeah, it totally depends on the use case, I think, and you also have to take the whole ICT, not only rely on only energy. So yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting, eh? And talking about things that are sort of related and often bundled together, right? That maybe are actually quite separate. I mean, my next question is for you, Benoit. It's about green ops versus FinOps, right? And the question is, if we manage to decrease the cost of something, an instance, a compute, whatever, an environment, but we don't manage to reduce the energy and water consumption, like what metric is more important and how do you decide? I mean, I think I know what some companies would say, but surely, and I think maybe there might be an opinion out there that actually if cost falls, water and carbon use should fall too. But of course, that's not necessarily true. So in that very rough question, Benoit, what would you say? How would you answer that?
Yeah, the green ops versus FinOps is a very interesting one as well. Of course, as you mentioned, there is no one straight answer, very straight to the point. But it seems like in some ways you could benefit on both. On some actions, as Julien said, when it's actions that actually reduce the global capacity you are allocating or reserving for your project, in many cases you could benefit both from a financial perspective and an environmental perspective. So that makes sense in many cases. That's pretty safe. Now it's more about should I buy some spot instances on that cloud provider? Should I buy either reserved instances? That kind of optimizations that's most of the time are motivated by money. It seems like it's not so obvious. It seems like there is a study from Teads, which is an advertising company in France. It was a few years ago. It's a bit old, but still it was interesting. They showed some metrics from their platform, and they showed that while they managed to reduce over time the number of vCPUs allocated to their projects, and that it allowed them to save money in terms of because they continuously evaluated the environmental impacts of it, it was not decreasing. So it was an example of what you say. Sometimes it's not just as simple as that. So of course there are many companies that will say it's okay, we are saving money, so we want it. Thing is that if you don't have proof that it's reducing the environmental impacts, you might also reinvest this money in another project and allocate new resources. So you might also, in a consequential approach, once again, you might also increase your impact by this way. So that's why it's always about what is the perimeter I'm looking at. Am I looking on one system, or am I taking a step back and looking at the impact of what I do on this system on the others? And then that's why the answer is not as simple as that.
Yeah, brilliant answer, Benoit. I really like that. I think that's a very interesting take on it. Julien, what do you think?
Well, I totally agree. Pretty aligned on this, and I will just add that yeah, it totally depends also on the company, the policies and so on of the company. If they are publishing ESG commitments also, if they have some commitments about reducing their greenhouse emission and so on, investing money on a greener solution could also be used for communication, greenwashing between quotes. So yeah, it could also minimize the loss on the cost, because if they're able to create some communication and having a brand that is more uh, uh, eco-friendly. I fucking had this term, but you, you get the point. Yeah, it could be also an investment, saying, oh, okay, we even if even if it costs a bit more, but it's greener, then it's okay.
It also does really feel like it falls a little bit into this macro micro argument, right? Like if you're too focused on your micro, on the specifics, and you're not looking at that macro, you're not really understanding what's going on in the wider. And then, I mean, the phrase kept on repeating in my head, the butterfly effect, right? Every action we take has an equal and opposite reaction somewhere else. And when we're playing with carbon and the environment and also finances, these butterfly effects they can ripple and they can be really impactful. Fantastic. Okay, Julien, we're going to go back to you with this next question. So it is something quite key to kind of the Cycloid world. It's when we look at internal developer platforms, right? They're very good for structuring and orchestration, and also kind of baking in guardrails and things like this. How can we use IDPs, internal developer platforms, so that developers don't need to read policies, right? Because I do believe that human nature is probably one of the problems that we have in this industry, that people are not lazy, they're busy, right? And they're off on other tasks. How can we use structures, technologies like IDPs to help implement defaults so that developers don't have to read, or other people or other end users, right? Can we do that? Is that a sensible way to do? Or are we really just sweeping the problem under the carpet and leaving it for later, for the next CTO or for the next leader?
Yeah, totally. I think IDP could be really great for that, because you can remove some cognitive load from developers and people who will use your service catalog. So if you have a good policy on the platform team, we will create a whole service catalog and so on. You can, for example, default should be the use of a green region with lowest carbon intensity, using data center with a better PUE, or that has been selected by the platform team depending on the policies of the company. So developers don't have to worry about this. They're automatically using the best approach. So yeah, you remove some cognitive load. Your IDP could also provide some defaults about automatic shutdown for non-production environment, nightly, on the weekend. There's some studies and reports that mention it's almost 30% of the cloud spend that are wasted on this topic, only for stuff running during the night and weekend, for example. So yeah, you could create some sobriety with those having to to make the police to do the bad cop with your employees and so on. So yeah, and to finish, I would say yeah, it depends on the container image also and application runtime. Lighter code, lighter containers will have a lighter footprint. So if you enforce a standardization across the whole company to use the best the best code approach and an infrastructure approach for reducing emission, could be really nice. So yeah, that's why I think IDP could really help on this part.
Hmm. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important, and of course, yeah, human nature always comes into that, right? And of course, if people are, you know, made to use the right settings and forced to sort of enact their work within a very specific framework, it's good for them. Benoit, what do you think? I mean, are there other technologies out there? Are there other way that we can bake in defaults? As a kind of consultant advisory role, right? How would you advise a company to implement things like this if they're, you know, yeah, just if they're trying to do this, basically? I won't be rude about developers who don't read policies.
Yeah, I think about at least two ways. One would work with IDP and would make sense with IDP. I think it's like developing under constraints. Like we could imagine an IDP that gives default sizes for, I don't know, instances, for database capacity, for any technical component, and say, hey, on that kind of project you are working on, regarding the other project we have made in the past, you should not need more than this kind of capacity for a simple setup. And so if you, we could imagine an IDP that says, hey, you are close to the max capacity, so maybe you could optimize something, and maybe you could go to that person who managed this project before you. Maybe he might have some insights. So that would be one way, developing under constraint. I think I really believe in this. And the second one is, even if it's not the default go-to, but still it can be useful in several situations. It's giving continuous insights on what you are going, so more different kind of metrics. So I realized something working on Scaphandre and on other projects after that. I realized that actually, if someone wants to optimize its code or system, it doesn't need energy metrics so much. Actually, you could just focus on memory consumption. You could focus on how much data you send on the network, on how much data you store on storage, how much compute capacity you are actually using with your app. uh, it's just that we are lazy. So having an energy metric shows you that, hey, it has an impact on the real world. It's not just IT resources that kind of seem virtual because we are in the cloud most of the time. It has an impact on the real world. So it's just a translation. I explain it as a translation. Um, so even if that's for sometimes wrong reasons, adding some metrics that have a meaning in the physical world kind of works as well. You could add, and what I encourage to do is not going just through energy metrics, going through environmental metrics. So
Mhm.
estimation of both embodied and operational emissions, adding metrics on maybe water consumption, on maybe abiotic resources depletions, which means minerals and metals. So it might not work for everyone, but it will
Mhm.
ring a bell to many people. They say, how is that come that I am consuming virtual instances and then it consumes water? What does that come from? Then you can go to the documentation. Then you can, oh, okay, it doesn't impact. It might raise awareness. I think in that way, that's interesting.
Mhm. I really love that.
Only the metric would be enough. Something we plan to do at Cycloid. It's on the roadmap. I don't know exactly when it will be released, but we'd like to gamify with some scorecards and so on those metrics. Because if you check only the metric and awareness, you can. I think we have a really good example with smoking. Smoke kills.
Mhm.
People were smoking. We told them you will have a cancer, you will have a disease, you will have, and people were still smoking. And finally, we had to take some action to forbid people smoking, and this really worked. This with forcing people, we observed that it decreased. And if you try to just inform, uh, of course, it will work for some people, but it will work for people who are already informed and people who are willing to do things better. But for people who are not really aware about it and not really concerned, finally it won't maybe won't be enough. But the brain has some biases and some, and we like game and we like perfection, we like scores, we like to have a good result, a good appreciation, saying, oh, you're the best guy. So maybe trying to gamify this in order to improve this. You have your dopamine shot on your brain saying, okay, I did something great, even if you don't really know exactly what you did. But if you have something giving you a thumb up, say, oh yeah, I'm really good and I'm really glad to. I did my week sprint planning and that's great. So so yeah, I think it's really important. That's currently what we're doing at Cycloid. We're showing for every developers when they're working on the project. We're showing the cost. We're showing also the the carbon footprint of the project. They're able to know if it increased, if it decreased, depending on the release they've done. But yeah, trying to having some scorecard and trying to gamify the process, I think will have even a better impact, a bigger impact than just having the metric.
Mm-hmm. I think that's brilliant. Translation, dopamine, and management with a whip. I think this is exactly the way to go on this one. I think it's really good. Gamification works supremely well. And yeah, we are all slaves to the dopamine hits, right? And this idea of translating into reality and translating into direct action, I think is a really nice concept. I've never heard that word used in this way to sort of describe this this kind of concept. Okay, we'll do the final last long question now. It's for you, Benoit. And it's that one that we've been waiting so long for. It's PUE versus WUE, so it's power water usage effectiveness, right? The question is, are they really useful KPIs, or are they quite easy to gain, to cheat on, to present in a shiny way when they're not actually really, and they're more kind of darker than they appear? Are they fit for purpose in 2025, or are they actually fit for cheating on in 2025?
Yeah, I will start with the dark side of it. So the dark side, let's start with PUE. Is that first, it's an efficiency metric. So as always, efficiency means optimization at best. Doesn't mean reducing the impact. We had a discussion with Julien before, and he said very rightfully, he said you can increase your energy consumption for IT and decrease your PUE. That's how it works. It's just a fraction with IT energy as the divider. So you can just So having a better PUE, it's very funny because every time you browse about IT and sustainability, you will hear about PUE. Everyone will say, yeah, but this provider has a lower PUE, so they are very optimizing stuff. And so, yeah, they are probably optimizing stuff. Doesn't mean they have a lower impact than the other data center. Not at all. It depends on the size of the data center. It depends on how much energy you consume as a whole, and not just a fraction. And there are many aspects where the PUE is gamed, as you said. Sometimes it's consciously, sometimes it's not an intent to game it, just the metric has flaws. First, it's always represented as an average, so it's a yearly average most of the time, but PUE depends on how important is your load, your IT load. It depends on the seasonality, it depends on the outside temperature, because you will consume more or less energy for cooling depending on how hot it is outside. And so you don't see that. You just focus on one metric that is fixed. That sometimes is not even measured in real conditions. It can be measured when the data center has just been built with some machines to simulate a working situation, putting the machines at full capacity, and then you measure the PUE. So you can have a much lower PUE in this way than what you would have if you measure in actual working situation. So yeah, so that's the dark side of it. There are norms that try to standardize the way we measure and we display the PUE to make it more comparable, useful. Most of the time, it's not respected, even by the biggest providers. You will see it very easily. The few providers that respect it, they provide audit report on their website. It's not to say that they are the best. That's not the point. It's just on this very specific point. One of the few is OVH. OVH on their website, they have the audit report for how is measured the PUE, WUE. That doesn't mean they do everything good on the other aspects. Just they are transparent on this. And there is another company that assessed how they measured it. That should be the norm. And that is respecting the norm, actually. But most of the time, it's not the case. On the bright side, it can be useful in a relative perspective. It's still something that even if we know it's flawed, even if we know it's not exact, because not displayed the right way, for especially for research, that's interesting to still have it, because we can see trends, we can see who is obviously gaming it, who is actually somewhat in the average of the industry, so maybe it's possible. We can see it helps, it gives insights. But the thing is, so to wrap it up, maybe the biggest problem of PUE is not having PUE and using PUE. It might be useful as every metric. The real problem with PUE is that it's a totem. It's like talking about sustainability to a data center or cloud provider, they will say, oh, PUE. So I kind of have a PUE fatigue because it doesn't mean anything in a sustainability perspective. And it doesn't mean it's not useful, but start to show real metrics and real transparency, like properly filling your energy efficiency directive report, which is now becoming a law in all EU members states. We know that the databases are still very, very empty, while so yeah, there is no financial incentive to do it, so that's why. But why should we wait for financial incentive? If you are really transparent and you really want to improve the topic, just fill your report in. That would be a first step, and there you would feel very interesting metrics about sustainability of your data centers, not just PUE.
Brilliant. What a great answer. And what a totem to avoid. Julien, any thoughts? I know you talked a little bit about it before, but I mean, of course, this is, again, something very close to Cycloid and your own heart. Like, are these gamified metrics, or as Benoit says, or, can we actually try to see that light and that brightness through them as well?
Yeah, well, that's not really my expertise field compared to Benoit, which is really its core expertise. On my side, I would say for everyone who will listen this podcast, I think PUE is like the gross domestic product. It's something a formula we invented at some point because there was nothing in order to calculate something, and we knew it wasn't perfect. We knew it must be improved and must be thought deeper and better. And the thing is that we're still using the same formula since 20 years, even more for the gross domestic product. And finally, it's totally, well, it's just a formula that gives a result, but the result is meaningless finally, because it doesn't compare things correctly and so on. And same for the gross domestic product. We should have improved it since so long. Even the creator, the author of the gross domestic product, say it's not a perfect thing. It must not be used, and we're still using it 70 years later. And same for the PUE, and I hope we won't use it for 70 years more. So yeah, that's my point. I think it's not really relevant when everyone aren't playing the same game. So yeah, difficult to compare and difficult to really trust this number.
GDP versus UE, both of them. nonsensical. No, I think it really makes sense that, in many ways we've found a metric, we stuck with that metric, we've built systems around that metric, we've built understanding around that metric, and people just are not willing to leave that metric in the past where it belongs. And it shines a light in a way, sort of almost the same thing on shadow IT, when we look at translating understanding into real rational reasoning, when we look at optimizing versus actual action. When we take all of the things that we've talked about, it's that we have the path to follow. We are able to go that way, but we seem trapped a little bit in our past and a little bit unable to be perfectly truthful, to use one word, truthful, right, with ourselves. We know that a lot of the metrics that we're using they're not fit for purpose. We're not using them correctly. So I think for me, this has been incredibly interesting, Benoit and Julien, and I just want to say thank you both very, very much for the time that you've given us today. Really interesting chat, lots of learnings, lots of facts, many new perspectives on green IT on a cloud. And I just want to say thank you very much. Julien, thank you. Benoit, thank you. If you just want to say any final words to our audience. Julien, I'll let you go first.
No, thank you for the invitation. Really happy to talk about those topics, and it's always a pleasure to discuss with Benoit. So we'll meet soon also on the Hubblo's days. So yeah, always a pleasure to discuss about it.
And Benoit?
Yeah, thank you for hosting us, and it was a pleasure. So yeah, I for the listeners, I would just encourage them to go fetch some new resources. There are plenty of them. Whether it's Boa Vista or other NGOs who are doing very great work, there are many of them. The documentation is here. So actually, if you really want to better understand the topic, it's out there. It's really easily findable. So just go for it, and even if you don't start with the most impactful measure first, that's not very important. What's very important is to start with something and to start really trying something, not just saying, oh yeah, I will do it in 6 months. In 6 months, it will be 6 months of too much greenhouse gas emissions emitted already. So start now.
Yeah, brilliant. And that is a great note to end on. Start now. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just like the X-Files and Mulder and Scully said, the truth is out there if you search for it.